haven't heard anything from Ken or Ralph that they won't be here, have you?
Oh, that reminds me, I should shut my phone off before it goes crazy.
Oh, jeez. Thank you. I always forget to shut mine off, too.
Yeah.
It's on vibrate already.
I need to wave the hammer around so that Frank knows.
Get your wrist ready.
Yeah, well, Frank knows to turn it on. Okay, folks, it's 6:30, and I call the October 7th Planning Board meeting to order. First on the agenda are the minutes. Do we have any approvals yet or not? I know you were gone, Paul, so.
Yeah, the minutes of September 2nd, 9th, 16th, and 23rd were submitted for approval. I recommend approval by the board.
I'll second.
Any comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained. And I believe we do not have any A&R plans. Is that correct, Brian? None came in last minute. Okay. So we move on to a public hearing, and these are the articles for fall town meeting. We're going to go through the planning board articles first. They don't currently have warrant numbers, so we will simply go through. The first, the article is to see if, actually, all of these, Paul, were published. You want to give the publishing dates?
Yeah. The article to amend Chapter 240 zoning of the Code of Falmouth was published on 9/19/14, 9/26/14, and 10/3/14.
And the subsequent ones were also published on those dates.
That's correct.
The first one, the article is to see if the town will vote to amend Chapter 240 zoning of the Code of Falmouth by deleting the words "for the elderly" where they appear in Article 32, public or nonprofit housing for the elderly, or do or take any other action on this matter on request of the planning board. The purpose here was to broaden this article's applicability. Right now, the way it was written, you could only use it for the elderly, for elderly housing. So this is the purpose of that. Do we have any comments? Remember, folks, this is a public hearing, so we're listening to the public's comments. Do we have any comments on that one? Okay, then seeing no hands coming up on that, I will close the hearing. We will take it under advisement on that particular article. The next one, and remember, the same publishing dates apply. The article is to see if the town will vote to amend Chapter 240 zoning of the Code of Falmouth by deleting in its entirety Article 18, floodplain zone, or do or take any other action on this matter on request of the planning board. The purpose here is to put the authority where it belongs with the Conservation Commission and remove it from zoning. The controlling factors are all covered under conservation law, under state law, and to have zoning say anything about it is not a good thing. So, are there any comments or questions in regard to this particular article? Okay, again, since I don't see any hands indicating questions, I will close the hearing on the article in regard to the floodplain zone. The next one, and again, the same publication dates. The article is to see if the town will vote to amend Chapter 240 zoning of the Code of Falmouth by 1, deleting sections 240-185 A, B, and C in their entirety. 2, add to section 240-195C a second sentence, in quotes, design features shall include but not be limited to site planning, building placement, building size, design compatibility, exterior appearance, construction materials and finishes, parking and roadways, landscaping and site grading, building entrance and exit placement, end quote. 3, delete section 240-195E in its entirety, or do or take any other action on this matter on request of the planning board. The purpose here is to give the planning board design review. Another committee had that function, but we've had many comments along the way that really didn't make sense. It ought to be with the planning board. We concurred, and the design review committee also concurred with that. So we would have that also in conjunction to our current site plan review. Are there any questions or comments from the public in regard to that? Okay, seeing no raising of the hands, I will close the hearing on that. Thank you. And now we move on. What did I do with that? Here we go. These are petitioner articles. The first article is to see if the town will vote to amend the official zoning map of the town of Falmouth so as to change the existing agricultural AA zone by rezoning from agricultural AA to light industrial C. The land at 210 Nathan Ellis Highway, shown on the Falmouth Assessor's map as map 06, section 03, parcel 008, lot 010, and map 06, section 03, parcel 008E, lot 000, located north of Nathan Ellis Highway, Massachusetts Route 151, and shown as A, lot 11 and lot 10 on a plan of land entitled Plan of Land in Falmouth, Mass., owner Carl Cavosa Excavating, Inc., 257 Palmer Avenue, Falmouth, Mass. 02540. Scale, 1 inch equals 50 feet. And there are the dates on here. Said plan is recorded at the Barnstable County Registry of Deeds in Plan Book 553, page 85. And B, in F Town of Falmouth, on a plan of land entitled Plan of Land in Falmouth, Mass., owner Carl Cavosa, Cavosa Excavating, Inc., 257 Palmer Avenue, Falmouth, Mass., 02540, scale 1 inch equals 50 feet, and again, dates. Said plan is recorded in the Barnstable County Registry of Deeds in Plan Book 553, page 85, on the petition of Nathan Ellis Highway, LLC, and others. And Paul, the publication dates, please.
This is published on 9/19, 9/26, and 10/3/14.
Okay, for the applicant.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For your record, my name is Jeff Oppenheim. I'm an attorney here in Falmouth with the law firm of Oppenheim and Nickerson. My partner, Jeff Nickerson's with me, as is my client, Carl Cavosa, who is the manager of Nathan Ellis Highway, LLC. He's also the president of Cavosa Excavating Company, Inc., a tenant at the property, and Cavosa Disposal, Inc. as well. As the board is very familiar, they've seen this plan. This plan was before them pretty much all summer long. And as a result of the decision rendered by the board in August, we're trying to effect a positive change. We're basing this in part on your comments in your decision, as well as the needs of my client and his very strong desire to continue to do business in our community. And hopefully from this site that he has owned for about 20 years now. So I will cover Article 9 first, which is the change in zoning, and then I guess you'll have to close that hearing and take comments or whatever, and then we'll go to Article 10, which is also my client's article. As the board is aware, but for your record, the site is 8.36 acres. It's agricultural AA zoning. I've already told you who our present tenants are. We're operating under a special permit issued by this board, modified at least 2 or 3 times down through the years, and as outlined in your decision in August. Contractors' yards are defined in the Falmouth zoning code as premises used by a building or construction contractor or subcontractor principally for storage of equipment and supplies, fabrication of sub-assemblies, and parking of wheeled equipment. Carl F. Cavosa Jr. Excavating is a contractor as defined and is agreed to by the Planning Board in their decision in August. He also has a disposal company that has commercial waste disposal business, and that business is really in two parts. It is servicing construction sites, which I believe is permitted under your decision, and the other aspect is the collection of waste in our community for disposal. That's by way of, dumpsters behind commercial buildings, behind buildings like our hospital and other public use buildings in the community. We're seeking a change in the zoning of 210 Nathan Ellis Highway from agricultural AA to light industrial C. We believe that light industrial C is more consistent with our proposed use of the property as a facility to house both Cavosa Disposal and Cavosa Excavation. But we will need further modification to LIC zoning, and that's the subject of Article 10, which I will discuss when that hearing is open. As the board is aware, and for the benefit of the public, the permitted uses in a light industrial C are commercial industrial uses. No residential uses, no community service uses are allowed in this zone. Contractors' yards are allowed as defined. Wholesale supply is allowed. Warehousing and storage buildings are allowed. Ground-mounted solar photovoltaic arrays are allowed. Accessory uses are television, radio, or similar towers not exceeding 50 feet in height, and support and office facilities accessory to the permitted uses, and fabrication of sub-assemblies associated with contractor trades. Special permit uses are television, radio, and similar towers which exceed the 50 feet in height, and restaurants or other places for serving food, and wind energy systems, subject to Article 34, excuse me. Now, the history of the site is that prior to 1981, it was zoned light industrial A. During our town meeting in 1981, town meeting voted to change it from light industrial A to agricultural AA, excuse me. We did some research and looked at the town meeting records as to why town meeting made this change. And I guess it would be interesting to us with the perspective of time to learn that the planning board sponsored this article, and the reason that they sponsored this article was based on expert opinion at the time, which said that it was probably the best future water source for the town of Falmouth. Now, I guess regrettably, in the years after that, we learned that our Mass Military Reservation was the site of numerous plumes that affected the groundwater in our community and led to one of the largest cleanup efforts in the United States. So the town is no longer relying on this area of our community for public water source. We rely on our reservoir, and we rely on our municipal wells, as this board is very, very familiar with. If you had a map of the plumes in front of you, and I know you have it and the town planner has it, you'd see that the plumes are, relatively close to the intersection of of 28 and 151 in North Falmouth. The original purpose for this site to go from light industrial A down to agricultural AA, again, is regrettably no longer a valid reason. We think it's a great area for the town and for our planning board to rezone. The use or the access to Route 151 and Route 28 is obvious. It's been discussed at several public hearings before this board. It would allow the use of the site by others in the building and construction trades as tenants in the future. Most of you, if not all of you, were not on the board in the 1990s. And it was in the 1990s that Carl Cavosa worked very closely with the board and with our town planner to try to create a contractor's yard bylaw. And it in fact happened after collaboration between contractors in the community. My client, among others, was leading that effort, and the board. And the reason that went on at the time is that there was an outflow from our community of small contractors to Mashpee and Bourne, where frankly the zoning was a little bit more kind and gentle for those uses. And town meeting made it clear during one of our town meetings that they didn't want that to be a trend, and they looked to you to stop it, and I think you did a lot approximately 20 years ago towards that effort. So things change over time, as we all know. That's why we have a planning board. Now we're looking for a little more latitude for this site. The planning board invited us in January of 2012 to comment on the change in zoning to light industrial C. It was something I had to remind myself of and go back and look at the correspondence that I had and the communications that I had with the planning board at that time. And I brought a letter along to refresh the planning board as to some of the communications. We were invited to a public meeting where that was discussed. We had a few reservations. We raised the reservations, but we said that we were interested in exploring that. So we're back in front of you about 2 years later or so. I guess at the time we were hoping that the planning board might designate this parcel as a light industrial C. That didn't happen. I'm really not exactly sure why. I'm not sure there was a specific reason. So we raise it now as a reason that we think it's an excellent site. We want, I hope we want this particular contractor to stay in our community. What he's doing serves a common good, and I think he has hopefully earned your support on this modification. And I'm very happy to take any questions, of course, from the board or from anyone else. And I'll hand out that letter to you now that I mentioned.
Are you ready for questions now, Jeff?
I'm ready.
Okay. Remember, folks, this is information gathering. This is the first time we've seen this iteration of the plan. And so we'll start with the planning board initially to ask questions, not to discuss the change in front of us. Does anyone on the planning board have questions as to what we have heard tonight that will lend to our discussion of it at another time?
I have questions.
Yes, Ralph?
Right. I have a question about what you proposed to add in 240-64-3E.
That's a different article.
Yeah, we're not discussing that article right now.
I apologize.
That's okay.
That's the second.
Any other questions from the planning board? Okay. And Doug, you said you didn't have a question?
No, I don't have questions. I understand.
Okay. So now we will go to the public, and if you have questions or comments, please direct them through the chair to Mr. Oppenheim. Does anybody here have any questions or comments in regard to this petitioner's article? Wow. Okay. Then seeing no hands and hearing no comments or questions, I will close this hearing, and we will take it under advisement. Thank you,
Madam
Jeff.
Chairman.
Okay, now, the next article, to see if the town, and by the way, the publication dates are the exact same as the one we just went through, the 19th, 26th of September and the 3rd, excuse me, of October. The article is to see if the town will vote to amend Chapter 240-64.3, zoning of the Code of Falmouth, by adding the following: 240-64.3.e, waste disposal contractor use, including a handling facility where solid waste, including recycled material, is brought, stored, and/or transferred from one vehicle or container to another vehicle or container for transport off-site to a recycling or solid waste treatment, processing, or disposal facility. Any materials, equipment, or vehicles used in connection with waste disposal may be stored, parked, serviced, and maintained at the site on the petition of Nathan Ellis Highway LLC and others. As before, we will go to the board and see if you have any questions. No?
Not really questions
Hmm?
now.
I'd like to make a presentation on this.
Sorry,
That's okay.
Jeff.
That's all right. I'd be happy to
I want to
entertain-
push ahead here, right?
I'll be happy to take any questions after a brief presentation. I'm not going to repeat the background, which I just discussed with the board as it relates to Article 9. The board knows that this is a relatively new zoning district created within the last couple of years by the planning board through town meeting. We currently have one parcel in our community that enjoys this zoning, and we're proposing to you and to town meeting that Mr. Cavos's site, shown on this plan, as described in the article, be the second parcel. Now, when you look at the language of LIC, as we discussed under Article 9, it refers back to contractors' yards by definition. And so we've been through that iteration. We've had a very long discussion with you about that. You've come to your decision. We're haven't appealed your decision, and we're trying to move on. And we think that in addition to rezoning the parcel, town meeting would have to change the language of the bylaw to allow this use that was just described, waste disposal contractor. And that is a description, essentially, of what my client does in his corporation, Cavosa Disposal, Inc. And it's what's described, at least in part, during the hearing process over the summer. So Cavosa Disposal Corporation does recycling. It does solid waste removal, and it does construction and demolition debris removal. And again, we think that all of these things are vital aspects of our community, or to our community. And we think this particular use and this particular change in the language to the zoning bylaw is really perfect for the site. And the reason we think that is that we have on one side of our property an animal hospital. That's to the west. On the north, we have land owned by the government, which is not developed. And there's a utility that runs through it. On the east, we have a rail line runs into the Mass Military Relation. On the south, we have the major thoroughfare over 51. So as a site for this particular additional use in LIC, we think it's really works very well. The planning board already in its initial, or one of its early decisions, requested that we have a deceleration lane. So we built a deceleration lane there. It's worked. We haven't had accidents at the site. We created a tall berm, which was planted with lots of mature shrubs and trees. It acts as a visual and also as a sound barrier for our operation. So the language in our request would allow our client to bring waste to the site and package it for delivery to either recycling or solid waste facilities. The whole effort of the Commonwealth to recycle is ongoing. The Commonwealth now requires certain food waste generators even to be recycling food waste. So it shows you where the trend is going. In construction projects, I think Mr. Fox mentioned this during the public hearings this summer, they're now in bigger construction projects. There's several dumpsters, and there's wood in one, there's plaster in another, there's metal in a third, and there's a tremendous effort, which is great for the environment, to try to recycle these materials, and they're doing some wonderful things in that area, and my client's very involved in that effort. It's part of his business. It's how he makes a portion of his living. So aside from that, it's also, I think, helpful for the board to know, although it's not the driving factor in your decision as to whether you'll support this, and it probably won't be the deciding factor as to whether our town supports it at town meeting, but we do employ 16 people in our community in this industry. We pay over $10,000 a year in excise tax to our community for the vehicles that do this work. And we support a lot of charities. And that's something we feel privileged to do. If you're interested in the long list, I would refer you to our client's website. And he also does things to support the police and fire department in our community. And I discussed that in the public hearings, but I'll mention it again. Sometimes things are disposed in these dumpsters, which our police department is very interested in retrieving. And, you know, there is a chain of custody which is involved in criminal law cases where, you know, the police have to be very careful to make sure they do not lose items that become later important in criminal investigations. That happened as recently as this summer with the murder behind the restaurant on Main Street. The Falmouth Fire Department occasionally has a need for heavy equipment, which is necessary to knock down buildings, which our fire department can't contain the fire unless they have some additional support. So we try to help out in this way. We do it because we're interested in the community. You know, I think that sort of help is harder to do when you're not in the community. And I think that's the reason why we want contractors of all kinds to continue to be able to do business in our community. Because I think they take a special interest in their clients, in their customers, and in the community itself, and try to help out when they can, given their expertise and their training. And, you know, we have people on this board who are using their expertise, and that's what we pride ourselves in as a community. So I'm very happy to discuss any questions or with the board. We hope that we can again work with the board in a way that we worked with you in the 1990s to reach some reasonable change in our bylaw to accommodate this use in our community. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. Now I'll go to the questions appropriately. Does anyone on the board have questions? Yes, Doug.
I have a question not directly for Mr. Oppenheim, but maybe to the planner. So we only have used the LIC for one other property, and it's in the same neighborhood.
On Landers Road.
Right. If now, when we make a change to this existing bylaw, it will retroactively affect that property, correct?
Yes.
And so then I guess I would suggest that maybe we should add some language to include screening of some type. Should that person, the other existing LIC, suddenly decide this is another thing he might want to do, maybe there should be some kind of vegetative screening or...
It might be something you discuss after you close the hearing.
Okay, so it's more than a question. Okay.
Yes.
Is there a state permit that's also required to accomplish what you want on this site?
Yes,
other than the
yes,
zoning
there
change?
is. Yes. Yep. The language I used in the proposed language comes from the Mass Regs, specifically 310 CMR under the Department of Environmental Protection, Section 19, Solid Waste Management.
Oh,
What's the total acreage of this site?
Our site is 8.63
Acres.
acres, yes.
Thank you.
Ralph.
Yes, Mr. Oppenheim, you see you got the language from the state regulation. I have a question about the language that you proposed here, where you say that solid waste is brought, stored, and/or transferred for another vehicle. And later you say any materials in connection with waste disposal may be stored on the site. I guess I need you to explain that, what you mean by storing solid waste on the site.
Yeah, I welcome that opportunity. And that language does come out of the definition of transfer station in
Transfer station.
in 310 CMR. So stored can be, you know, in a container. For example, bulk storage of cardboard. I think that's a good example. If cardboard is coming in from different sites, because we have, for instance, at the hospital, a separate container just for cardboard at that site. And I'm sure they have it in Woods Hole at some of the institutions as well. So when that container is emptied, it would be brought back to the site, and that container would be emptied and put into a larger container with other cardboard from other sites. And when that container is full, it would be brought to a recycling center. So that may be the same day, or it could be a week later. And that's when I'm saying stored, I mean it in that sense. It's not kept there permanently by any means. The rubbish, that waste isn't stored there at all. That's going to, a facility, CMAS or wherever, to be, turned into electricity, et cetera. Plastics, I could see that being stored in a container, and not leaving the site on a daily basis. I think it all really depends on the volume that is collected on a given day, and whether it, is sufficient to then truck it to a recycling center. Is that helpful, or?
Well, it is helpful, but it doesn't cover what my issue is, and that is, you spoke about cardboard. Well, that's an inert thing that it's, has no real problems, not have problems with. What I'm concerned about are vegetative solid waste. For instance, waste coming from a restaurant or something such as that. Storing that on your property and/or transferring it is what I want to know whether or not your definition of solid waste covers that. In other words, does it include that? Because solid waste of a vegetative state could be a real issue.
Well, then we would be, I guess we're talking about composting.
Whatever you would get it from a restaurant, or
Right.
Stuff that is vegetative. It's
Food waste.
Yeah, it's
food waste,
food
and
waste.
all that kind of thing. From waste from a supermarket where they tear off a bunch of the stuff that they're not going to sell and whatever. Anything that could draw,
Critters.
rodents, critters,
Yeah.
yeah, whatever. If that's under your definition of solid waste, that's what I want to know.
Okay, I'm going to check to make, with my client in a moment, maybe when you're taking public comment, and I will try to refine my answer to your question. But I will also say to you that if it is composting, then that's controlled by the DEP, okay? And I guess it's now being encouraged by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And vegetative materials, my understanding, okay, as a layperson, is not a solid waste expert or vegetative waste expert, is that, that material is covered, it's, very carefully monitored, it's turned. The idea is to get that material to a compost state as quickly as possible, because that's the product that gets resold, okay? So people who are in the composting field are, they're collecting this stuff not out of the goodness of their heart. I mean, although they're probably very environmentally conscious, they're also trying to turn it back into a product which can be used in their community and beyond. I understand your concerns that there might be, rodents, et cetera, but the operations are very, some of them are very involved and very, they're monitored very carefully as to temperature, they add water, they're covered, et cetera. Some of them are very large in operation. We wouldn't be doing anything like that, and that's not necessarily what our business is. But to answer you as to whether we would consider doing that, yes, I guess we would consider doing that if there's a need in the community.
I may have been a little remiss. I think I should have included animal and vegetable waste, because you could get both of those kinds of wastes from a restaurant or from a supermarket or something like that. So I understand composting vegetable waste, but you don't compost animal waste, bones and other, whatever else can be generated by a restaurant or a supermarket as examples. So that's what I'm concerned
Yeah,
about.
well, then I think that
If
gets
those-
separated then. I mean, that would
Well,
be...
I need to know whether those two things, if animal and
Yeah.
vegetable waste are included in your definition of solid waste. That's what I need to know.
I believe under my current zoning, agricultural AA, I can do composting. And that's being done right now on different sites in Falmouth, agricultural AA. So the answer
But
would be
you're asking
yes.
to change that.
Yes, but that's why we're including all this language, is we'd like to be able to continue to do that or have that ability on that site. I don't want to change my zoning and then lose some of the things that I actually have.
Mr. Herbst, did I adequately answer your question? I want to make sure I did.
Yeah, I think you did.
Okay, good.
Are there others on the planning board? Okay, I have a question. As you know, when we change zoning like this, you're presenting it as if it's just for your client. But this would go with any light industrial C zoning. And the minimal lot size for light industrial C is 40,000 square feet. I wonder, when you put this together, whether you had thought about perhaps in this one instance, increasing the, not just for your client, but in this one usage instance, increasing the minimal lot size.
That would be perfectly acceptable to my client. The reason we didn't take that approach, frankly, is we did not want to be criticized by the board or perhaps the public as, targeting our one site. But if the board said, we could support this sort of change if it was on LIC land of, 5 or 6 or 8 acres or more, that's fine with us because we have an 8.63 acre site.
Okay, so further to that, I come at it because you'd want sufficient buffers for this type of usage if you were anyplace else in the town of Falmouth. But then I have an additional question. With your research on this, did you find out any kind of indication of a larger minimal size that seems to work for this type of activity?
No, not from our research, no.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Are there any other questions from the board? Okay. Then
have
I-
one.
Oh, yes, Paul.
Did I understand that you are currently composting on this site?
No, we're not.
Anybody else on the board?
I'd like to qualify that, Mr. Dreher. I mean, we take, grass clippings and we take other things like that and compost that and make it into loam, but not the type of composting we were just talking about with Mr. Herbst, where we're taking materials from restaurants and the like and composting in that vein. I mean, there's different types of composting. Again, I'm not an expert, but, grass clippings and wood chips and all of that, I believe, we are composting.
Yes.
I think we need to be careful on talking about
restricting composting in an agricultural zone. We have a lot of it going on, and has been going on for years, and I think, some of us are a little bit worried about it, but that's a whole nother issue, and we'd have a lot of discussion, and a lot of other people if we were going to restrict that. I think it's a question of whether we're going to be able to move this use into light industrial C, and think about it just from that perspective.
Okay.
Can I respond to that?
Yeah.
What I'm asking about is, I understand this as temporary storage of materials, you can then remove it to a more permanent location. Composting, to me, would imply a much longer process, like at the town compost facility. So I'm not saying you can't do, I'm trying to understand if you do compost there, and if you were planning on doing composting, that seems to be different than what the purpose of this bylaw is. I didn't like Tim's comment.
So I'm told that the kitchen waste type composting is approximately 90 days, believe it or not. That's how quickly these processes are working. They've got it down. If you have the right mix. Removal of plant materials from sites, which my client's been doing since you granted him a special permit in the 1990s, and brings it to his yard and composts, all kinds of plant materials that were on that site. That might take a little longer to turn it into, loom and a product that then would go back to the site. The topsoil goes back pretty quickly. That goes back when the house is ready and they're planting lawns and they're planting flower beds, et cetera.
Anything else from the board? Okay, now I will move on to the public, and please address your questions through the chair. And we'd be looking for questions or comments in regard to the change in the LIC. Is anybody in the public? Yes, Jenny. Yes, please go up there because we're being televised, so.
I would just like to ask if...
Identification, please.
Jenny, we need to have your name.
Oh, my name, Virginia Gregg. I'm a member of the Solid Waste Advisory Committee. I'm curious to know if there will be any waste on that property overnight in trucks or dumpsters or in a building, or is it just going to be transferred and out of there by the time they close down the end of the day or over a weekend?
My understanding from what has been said is that, yes, it could stay there overnight.
It could stay?
It could stay overnight, and if they are allowed composting, it most definitely would be there.
Okay.
Because it takes time to compost.
Well, I heard him say that about cardboard. I'm not worried about recyclables.
No, this is other matter too. This is the clippings and the restaurant waste that...
Just garbage.
That's now being required by the state to be composted too.
And will the transferring happen in a building or outside?
I think I read your lips say in a building. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Nancy.
Nancy Hayward, West Falmouth. Mrs. Gregg asked some questions. My feeling about this is that it seems too vague. Now, you, Madam Chairman, you mentioned that LIC needs to be 40,000 square feet. Now, my understanding is that this whole property is 8.63 acres. Is the plan to make the whole property LIC? And it seems like you could end up with, I want to say, an infinite number of vehicles, and I know that was an issue previously with how many of this, that, and the other thing you had on this lot as the AA zoning. So I'm confused about this. What would I be having zoned LIC? How much of it, the whole thing? Then what happens to all those other permutations that were gone through previously? Thank you.
Jeff?
To answer Mrs. Hayward's questions first, the Article 9 describes my client's entire site. So the answer is that LIC's, what we're requesting is LIC zoning for the entire site, 8.63 acres. The second question, I think was more of a comment, really, than a question. She implied that this was vague. You know, again, we use the language the Commonwealth of Massachusetts uses and has used for a long time, so that it would be consistent. So we have to go get a permit from the state. They'll know exactly what it is that we're asking for. As far as Mrs. Gregg's question, so the work would be done inside, the transferring, and the only situation where we would be keeping municipal rubbish, let's call it, the non-recyclables, would be if a landfill is closed, or someone requests that we pick up a dumpster late in the day. Because we make our money by picking the trash up, not by holding it. Okay, so when we pick it up, we want to drop it off so we can pick up more. I mean, it's that sort of a cycle. But if someone calls us on a Saturday afternoon, it's an emergency, they want the dumpster out, then we're going to have that dumpster until we can get rid of it on Monday morning. And that was contemplated, it was discussed to the extent that the planning board allowed for that in prior special permit decisions. It doesn't happen frequently. It's not something we look forward to doing for obvious reasons, but it does come up occasionally on an emergent type basis.
Thank you. Are there any other comments or questions from the public? Yes, sir. Please go up to the podium and state your name.
Bob McLeod, East Falmouth. My question is, would other contractors be allowed to use the site where Mr. Fazolko is, got the wrong name there, that's the next one. Where Kyle is using, as a disposal site, would other contractors be able to use this site also by bringing their rubbish to Kyle for him to recycle or do whatever he's going to do with it and haul it away?
Good question.
Could you answer that?
By definition, that's what a transfer station is, yes.
So other haulers could bring it to the site for consolidation.
Right. And again, the purpose of doing this is not to hold it, but to get rid of it. I mean, in the recycling world, obviously, when you bring it to market is when you make the money, not when you keep it, on your vehicle or in a dumpster in your yard.
Are there other comments or questions? Okay, seeing no raised hands, and then I will close this hearing and take it under advisement. Brian, we're likely to take this up again when?
Next week.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. we'll be back, if, you know,
Yeah.
you can participate, that'd be great.
Thank you.
They can't participate, though, right?
No, but if they have questions, we can ask. So we move on now, under discussion.
Yep.
The applicant is Ryan Development LLC, site plan review to construct a 2,400 square foot commercial building on .68 acres with associated parking, drainage, and landscaping. Hancock Associates.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. For the record, Attorney Kevin Erickson on behalf of the applicant. With me tonight is Joe Pesnola from Hancock Associates and Robert Walker, manager of Ryan Development LLC. As Madam Chair mentioned, we are here before you tonight for a modification to an existing site plan approval. The property in question is 587 Main Street, 17 and 19 Nye Road. The property is 29,605 square feet. We're proposing a 2,400 square foot retail building. When we were before this board last, and one of the changes that you'll note right away, we were proposing a two-story building. We've eliminated the second story, proposing now just a single story with the associated parking lot that you see there. We've also cut out a proposed curb cut. There's now only one proposed curb cut on Nye Road, closer up to Main Street. We do meet all bylaw requirements relative to setbacks, lot coverage, parking, landscaping, etc., and are asking for this board's approval on this modification as proposed. I do have Joe Pesnola who would like to say a few things about some of the additional engineering changes that we've made since last we met. And then, of course, both Joe and myself are here for questions from the board as well as the public. So. I have some elevations that I think we can 50.
Sure.
Thank you.
Good evening. Again, for the record, Joe Pesnola from Hancock Associates. We did, with regard to this plan versus the prior plan, we did make some changes. Prior, there was, the building was larger, and it had the residential units on the second floor, so that's been removed. But essentially, we're still fronting the building on Main Street. With regard to Nye Road, we have eliminated the second curb cut that's further to the south on Nye Road. So now we just have the single curb cut up close to the building, and that comes in and accesses all of the parking. With regard to the immediate needs or the needs from the zoning standpoint for the building itself, we need 12 spaces, and then the balance of the parking will be an additional 38 spaces. Just to run through some of the comments, that we did receive a comment letter from the town engineer, and we did respond to that. And I've sent into staff this yesterday or this morning a letter responding to that. And we did have a couple of tweaks to the plan that I can go over now, the responses and the minor changes. There was a comment with regards to the number of handicap spaces. We had figured the number of handicap spaces based on the required parking, and the town engineer felt it should be based on the total parking. So we have added a handicap space kind of on the westerly side, in between the two bays of parking. And so now we have two. The plan did note that we had 46 total spaces. The actual total number is 50. So there's 2,400 square feet of retail that requires 12 spaces and 50 total parking spaces. The next comment from the town engineer had to do with just the configuration of the parking spaces at the back, and we've made some shifts to the east just to make the interplay between the handicap space and the dumpster area better. As far as comments on drainage, the town engineer felt that our drainage was more than sufficient to meet both the town requirements and the state requirements for capturing, treating, and recharging the drainage on site. His last point is something that we would like to, again, discuss. This came up at the last meeting, the last site plan before this board, and it was the sidewalk on Nye Road. The town engineer made the recommendation at that time, and he's making it again, that we carry the concrete sidewalk all the way around the corner on Nye and all the way down across the entire Nye Road frontage. What we're proposing to do under the current plan is wrap the sidewalk and come down to our curb cut and make that concrete with the grass strip alongside it. I think that would lend itself to the commercial uses across Nye Road and our use. But then after that, we don't have a curb cut again. We'd like to maintain or leave it the way it is, which transitions to a bituminous sidewalk. There's some street trees there, and we included in our letter just a photo of that looking down Nye Road on the right-hand side, just to maintain that feel and what have you. It's our position that, you know, our customers would come in off of Main Street, turn right into the site, and then leaving, we would promote them to take that left-hand turn and get back up onto Main Street. So I think our plan did address the comments that we heard, both from the neighbors at the original planning board hearing and at the ZBA hearing with regards to trying to minimize the travel on Nye Road. All the other commitments with regards to landscape buffers and so forth have all been maintained from the previous plan to help, as we did then, we are now trying to buffer and separate the residential uses from this development. Be happy to answer any questions the board might have.
Any questions? Yes, Doug.
The parking space that you shifted closer to Nye Road to get away from the dumpster, see, that space is backing right out into your entrance. Don't you think that's a bit of a concern?
Oh, when they're coming in, I think they'll come in and get into the parking space. When they're leaving, they'll be backing with the back of the car going into the site.
Right, but you've got these plantings here. It might be tough visibility to see if there's a car coming and you're backing up into the entrance. It seems like a potential problem to me. I don't know.
We can certainly take a look at that and see if we could get that further back. And also look at the plantings and make sure that there's no visual obstructions.
That's the first thing I noticed.
Yes, Ken?
I just have one question. Not being on the board when this plan came before, there's a huge amount of parking spaces. Was there some other use other than the retail for all those parking spots? Nobody has 50 spaces. Just
No, and thank you, it is a fair question. I don't think it's any secret that there's a suggestion of a proposed hotel across the street. If that hotel is approved and developed, the idea would be to lease the balance of the spaces to the hotel, which again, I don't want to go too far down the road of the hotel, because that's going to require its own site plan approval process, its own special permit process, and a process with the Cape Cod Commission. So, but that certainly is a consideration for the amount of parking spaces. Now, if that hotel were not developed, it's still conceivable that we will need these spaces for, say, a more parking-intensive use that is allowed as of right in this zone. As this board's aware, there are a number of allowed uses in this B2 business redevelopment zone. And for economic viability, we believe that the only way to develop this site is to allow for that possibility. However, first and foremost, the idea is that ultimately those parking spaces would be earmarked or leased towards a hotel use across the street. And I would also like to point out, I know it's odd to see a site plan like that. There are no maximum parking space requirements in the bylaw. There are naturally lot coverage requirements, but we do comply with all of those.
I was just curious why the apartments were eliminated.
That was a business decision.
Yeah.
It just really was not something that made a whole lot of sense from our perspective, from an economic standpoint.
Okay.
Ralph?
That's a shame, because this town advocates combining housing in areas such as this. It doesn't make any sense to me. You're saying it's an economic decision. Well, we're concerned about housing in this town. And your economic decision doesn't seem to be compatible with what the town wants.
Well, Mr. Herbst, with all due respect, I appreciate that. But what we are applying for is allowed as of right in the district. It's our property, or will be our property, and our economic calculus should be a factor, notwithstanding the fact that you may have liked to see apartments.
Other questions from the board? Okay. I'll move on to the public for questions and comments, but please pay attention to what I'm going to say at this point. This is a site plan review. They are quite correct in saying that what they are doing is allowed under our zoning. What our planning board can do is to look at issues like parking, circulation onto the street, circulation within the property, landscaping, screening from neighbors, lighting, access, that kind of thing. They are within their rights to build exactly what they are proposing to build. And what we can do as a planning board is simply have a site plan review and make recommendations in regard to that. So with those parameters in mind, I welcome any questions you might have or comments that you might have insofar as the landscaping or the lighting on the property. Yes, please come up to the podium.
I'm Jerry Smith. I live at 27 Nye Road. I've spoken before. So my concerns are everything you just mentioned. I am pretty much the only abutter. My fence, there's a fence that that they will own, that they do own, and they can do whatever they want with their property. I'm not up here to dispute that. I'm hoping to persuade you to protect my property line in my house. My house is 5 feet from the fence, parking is 15 feet from that. The fence is 6 feet high, so I'm gonna look right into this lot. And again, I just bring up the same concerns, if you could take into consideration the height of the lights, which I believe they changed the last time, which was great. The fence is old and in disrepair. I'm asking for a new fence that goes the entire length. The front of the fence is only 4 feet high, and it doesn't go all the way out to the curb, so the first 10 feet of that fence is only 4 feet high. They changed the curb cut up to the front, which is great for me, not for everybody, I'm sure. I don't know what goes on with the corner there at Nye Road. They will continue the concrete sidewalk around to their curb cut and they were going to leave it as is beyond it, which is fine. But there is a curb cut, right at the mailboxes, right on my property line and theirs. So is that going to be filled in? And some of the trees are going to be taken away. So I think they addressed the height of the bushes, the arborvitaes, not to cap them at 5 feet. So these are just my concerns that I hope you take into consideration. I'm not trying to force anybody to do anything with their property. And they've been pretty good about adjusting to what I am. The height of the lights, again, hopefully my second floor is right there. I'm going to be waving at Mr. Dugan's real estate, on a random basis. And then my concerns with the 50 parking spaces, is this at 9 o'clock, does this lot close down? Is it controlled? I don't see it. Before it was monitored with a key entry. So I'm just a little concerned about that. Is this 24/7 lot? And then if the hotel doesn't go through, and do I have the ability to come back and say, oh, wait a minute, now this lot's these 50 parking spots are gonna be used for what? So I'm just hoping that you take all that into consideration. That's it.
Would you like some response to your concerns?
Sure I would.
I think they're willing to respond, not all, but some of your concerns,
They've been
okay?
great with responding.
With regard to the fence, yes, we're gonna repair the fence and make sure we have a solid 6-foot stockade fence from one end to the other. The screening, we're gonna retain the trees within that 15 feet that are there, some of the mature trees, but we're gonna augment that with a solid barrier. Arborvitaes first, and then towards the lot, an row of English yew. So there'll be a very dense planted buffer. We have lowered the lights as we discussed at the last hearing in the parking lot in accordance with Jerry's wishes. With regard to the curb cut, there is a curb cut there. It's the driveway for the two houses. We would close that in. We would repair the sidewalk, and we would repair the landscape strip. So it would be as if it hadn't been there. I think with regard to the 50 spaces and the need to come back, I think we need the process to play itself out. When the hotel comes to fruition and comes before this board and any other boards in town, then that discussion will be had. How are we compliant with parking? How many of these spaces are we using? Traffic patterns, all of those things would be germane to those discussions.
Thank you for your response. Is there anyone else from the public who wishes to pose any questions to the developers of this site? Yes, ma'am. Mrs. McDonald first. Oh, first? Okay. Ooh.
I'm Harriet Dugan, and I have a question. How many trees are actually going to be removed from this entire lot? And actually, how high are these trees that are supposed to be buried and if they were put back? And the curb cut, it's my understanding that most of the traffic now will be heading onto Main Street. the way it's set up right now?
That's correct. We envision the traffic to leave our lot and vehicles to take a left onto heading towards Main Street and not head down Nye Road, as we don't see there would be any purpose for them to do so. And by putting the curb cut closer to Main Street, I think we in fact encourage such behavior. As far as the plantings, the arborvitae are shown as 8 feet, 8 feet arborvitae. I don't know how many trees. The landscaping is done intentionally to meet the landscape requirements, which, you know, are relatively onerous in the town of Falmouth, but for good reason, and they provide a very significant buffer. But an 8 feet, 8-foot row of arborvitae is a very good screening buffer.
But how many trees are coming out of the lot? How many of the mature trees that are there will be left?
As you know, the site currently has a gravel area up on Main Street, and then 1719 Road are developed with two residential units, parking, pavement, what have you. In between the gravel lot and the Nye Road lot, there is a stand of trees. Those will all come out. I don't know how many are in there. But there is 3, 4, 5, 6, probably 7 trees along the perimeter, both south and north, as well as the street trees along Nye Road that will be standing.
Thank you.
I myself think there's going to be too much traffic moving onto Main Street. My building is across the street. You have Dunkin' Donuts, you have the gas station. And right now, to get out of my driveway in the summer, sometimes it takes 15 to 20 minutes. So if this becomes a hotel across the street, and of course I appreciate Nye Road, it shouldn't have all the traffic going down there, that's going to be a complete bottleneck. So I'm not pleased with that.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to ask a question? Yes.
Leslie McDonald, Town. These aren't exactly questions, there's some comments, and this was the letter that I want to submit to you, but I haven't sent it yet. I'm going to read. This site plan for the corner of Main and Nye has been submitted to you before and was approved in the spring. It's a generic plan with a generic building that is not in the spirit of a Preserve America town that respects the history of an old residential neighborhood. Nor is it a plan that is true to the intent of the business redevelopment district. It removes 2 affordable historical rental homes and no longer even offers affordable housing in the building. The proposal could offer to share a driveway access with the existing business to the west. Instead, it would close off the Main Street curb cuts and would direct all traffic to residential Nye Road. In the opinion of many, this is not a good plan, but I believe it will be approved by the planning board anyway. So I will ask your consideration and clarification of some important details. The existing site plan is incomplete or incorrect. The letter of submittal does not square with the plan in square footage. I don't know which trumps which, but there are differences in numbers between the submittal letter and the plan. The plan does not show the town-owned street tree on Main, nor does it show the grassy sidewalk strip on Main or Nye. It's all listed as concrete. And so it shows grass on your plan up to the end of the electric shop and the curb cut. And then the rest of Main Street, it shows just concrete. And it does not show the tree. There's another street tree on Nye that is shown adjacent to the construction access. And Mr. Smith, I don't know if he realizes this, but the existing curb cut on Nye, next to his property, will be the construction access. Apparently, after that, they will close it off and put some of those plants. The trees in the garden, also the American cedar, the clump of American cedars, fairly close to the road at the entrance to Nye, the two houses on Nye, those will be taken down. They are old, very old, and increasingly rare. The trees, so the two street trees and the grassy strips need to be protected during construction and preserved for the finished product, preferably in writing. The latest fashion, in quotes, in site preparation is to strip a construction site of all or most vegetation and remove the topsoil, leaving a sandy desert through the construction process, whenever that might happen, the construction process. So it could sit, for example, on the Fay lot across the street. It's a terrible disservice to any neighborhood. We would like to be protected from this approach. The parking lot will be very visible from the street. There needs to be a much higher, very dense hedge along Nye, and certainly along Mr. Smith's line, I would think, and the motel. I'm sorry, yes, part of it is backs up to the motel in addition to the electric shop. So in any case, the hedge really ought to be like the grandfathered Warmel parking lot on Scranton, which borders another part of our residential neighborhood. It's privet, 5.5 feet tall, and very well trimmed. It's a very dense, not bad hedge, which does allow us not to see the pavement and the striping and the vehicles and the dumpsters. So I had some tree and planting questions. I was hoping the landscaper would be here, but I don't think so. I'm concerned the plants that are going in, they're low and they're beachy. This is an urban environment at that intersection. And if you look across the street, which I know you're not supposed to think about, that's a failed landscape. And it's because partly the things that were put in there, yes, they do go along with your standards, but they are not suitable for that environment and that amount of care, which is not very much. And then the trees, I think, I don't know this for sure, but I think that the trees, the leafy trees, I don't think they're canopy shade trees. I think they're the lower growing, street acceptable plants, but some of that area needs shade, and canopy shade trees, the tall street name trees, elm, maple, oak, not oak these days, trees that will give some good shade to the parking lot and the buildings and the street. A real concern for this parking lot is the dreaded after-the-fact chain link or shiny plastic fence. See the Island Queen lot on Scranton when you come up from Robbins Road, and that's all you see now. It had good plantings at one time, but now some of the rhododendrons made it, and then the rest is chain link fence. So that's what we see. And then on McDougal's, on the Heights Road, they were required to do their arborvitae, and they did. And then they put a chain link fence on the street side so that the chain link fence is what we see, and then the still not filled in arborvitae behind them. So we would like some protection from that sort of a possibility. And of course, we would like a perpetual maintenance plan for this lot, not 1 year, which I think is what your requirement is. If a plant dies after a year, they're not even required to replace it. Rubbish and its collection is a real worry for our neighborhood. The dumpsters have been moved to be visible from the street at the access across from Savon. The screening for this rubbish space needs to be shown on the plan. There has been considerable controversy in town lately regarding the much earlier hours allowed for rubbish collection. This needs to be clarified satisfactorily with reasonable residential hours. The original approval of this parking lot contained a condition that all exit traffic be directed to the north toward Main, so a left turn only. There is no provision for this in the recent plan that's visible. Apparently, we have, none of us, any protection from the GPS, which I learned is directing all traffic from the south to Main through Queen and Nye. So we all see and hear and smell the huge double-long industrial trucks on our little streets along with the motorcycles and the boat traffic, 2 boats heading south. Pedestrian and 2-wheel amenities are not evident in the plan. Folks will cut through this lot on foot and on wheels, on bicycles, on skateboards, on rollerblades, and wheelchairs. The people from the nursing home go out for walks, and they will cut through. Benches, in my opinion, should be everywhere along our streets. Some generosity here would be most appreciated. 2, I'm really on the last paragraph. 2 recent studies have been completed for the town but are not readily available. One of the studies is an assessment of the intersection traffic along Main by the Cape Cod Commission. A second study regards the crucial need for affordable housing in the town. We would like these 2 studies to be addressed in your decision here. Thank you for your consideration. There was one other thing I wanted to ask. Do you have submitted letters in your files?
Yes.
There was one letter that was written that addresses parking lot problems. And the paragraph about the chirp and the alarm, would anyone be willing to read that? Or may I read that to the,
No.
It's very important.
The chair, ma'am, but, it's against the plan review.
Chirp.
Yeah. We don't deal with that. We deal with the kinds of things that you were bringing up.
Oh, I did that, oh, good, all right.
Okay.
But you don't deal with chirp?
No, really, and I
Who does deal with
appreciated that.
Chirp.
I know what you're talking about, the backup
Yes,
chirp.
yes.
And there's no way we can do that.
But who would? Just for future, because it really is an important issue.
These are commercial vehicles, and
No, but even the locking and the unlocking of every single vehicle, your
We
remote
can't
control, chirp.
It's a permitted use.
Yeah, we can't do that. We can't do anything about it. I know exactly what you're saying.
Yes, everybody does.
But I do appreciate it.
Thank you.
You've got a very dense
Yes, I said
letter
a lot.
there, and there was a lot.
Excuse me.
But no, it's full of a lot of things that we would consider. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I only made 1 copy.
That's okay.
But I think you can have it.
Don't worry about it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who wishes to say anything? Yes.
You got the other lady in the back there, too? Pat, you got the other lady in the back, too?
Allison Leschen. I have a question. It's maybe more for the developers, but, I'm hoping that you can address it. I don't understand why, could they come to you now with the proposal just for the building and the associated, 12 or 14 spaces, that I don't think really anybody objects to other than the loss of the housing that's been mentioned. And then later, if the hotel gets approved, come back for the extra 50. I don't understand why build a 50-lot parking lot that might have no use down the line. That seems like a really bad thing to approve because as I understand it, the zoning only allows those parking spaces to be used by businesses within 300 feet. Is that correct?
We require a minimum number of parking spaces, but we do not say you cannot.
Right, but I guess my concern is that we'll end up with a unused, unmaintained, because there's no business incentive to maintain it, 50-lot parking lot if the hotel doesn't go through? And why not just wait? And I guess I'm asking, would there be a disadvantage to the developers to come to you now with just the 14 spaces and the building? And then later, if this is all by right, can they just come back later for the extra, whatever, 38 or, I don't know.
You're absolutely right that they're going to have to answer for their reasoning on that. So I would ask them.
Okay, I guess, so there's no like zoning or legal reason why they couldn't do it separately? Like they don't lose some
Not that I
right
know of.
by,
Brian, what?
it doesn't have to be a package deal, in other words, to be by right? That's my
But
question.
they can do what they want to do on
The
this.
plan is tenable as it appears before the board, and
Right.
they're within their rights to submit it. It's, again, up to the applicant.
Yeah.
Okay, no, I understand that. I guess what I'm asking is there any, I get that they can do it this way, but again, my concern, then I'll talk about the concern of this plan, is that if the hotel doesn't go through, we end up with a whole bunch of extra parking that, has removed this affordable housing, it's causing all these other problems, and to be honest, there's going to be very little incentive to maintain it, or police it or anything else if there's no business associated with it. And it seems like if the hotel doesn't go through, there's really no viable use for those spaces. That hasn't been demonstrated. I don't think that there is, at least not to my satisfaction. So I guess I'd love to hear from them if they're like, why not do it in 2 stages?
You wish to answer that concern?
Well, what I'd like to first do is clarify, because I've heard the term used very loosely tonight, that we're removing affordable housing. We are not removing any affordable housing as that term is used in Massachusetts state law. It's not affordable housing, just regular single-family residences right now that are used for rental. As far as the process, I really don't want to go into it because it's our right to do it this way, and this is the way that we've chosen to move forward.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes? Yes, sir.
Keith Schwagel, Queen Street. New information, you always like new information, so I hope I
do
came
indeed.
up with it. Not to dispute your definition, but it is affordable housing by definition by the federal government, not by the state of Massachusetts. I am familiar with that in my previous employment. Mentioned, don't care about housing, don't care about traffic. What's the point of the local comprehensive plan? That's exactly what it asked for. And now, if town meeting, our legislative body passed that, and then we ignore it because you say by right, which is, all rights have some limits, then what was the point of the plan? What was the point of our legislative body passing that, and then it's ignored in its totality? The housing has been on our front pages of our enterprise. Mr. Chairman, you happen to make comments about the importance of it, and I think everybody here commented about the importance of it. To simply dismiss it because of economic analysis, I don't think this board should be considering that as part of their factors about their economic viability.
The problem is that your comments here have nothing to do with site plan review.
I'm going to get to that. I wanted to get that. Okay. The parking lot itself, they said two-way traffic has to be 24 feet, it says in the bylaws, for the two-way traffic in the parking lot. It's interesting that that's required to drive in a parking lot, but Nye Road is only 18 foot wide. They claim that the traffic is not going to go that way. There's nothing to stop traffic from going that way. In fact, that's where they're going to go, because when Main Street backs up, they can't get in and out of Main Street. If you notice that Nye Road is not exactly parallel to, or perpendicular to Main Street, you can't make turns there. Traffic's going to back up. They're going to go down Nye Road. Unless you make Nye Road a dead end, that's the way they're going to go. Nye Road is 18 feet wide. It's, just to give you a sense of that, a two-car garage is 20 feet wide. The other thing is that I don't quite understand their plan. They show Nye Road 40 feet wide. And I don't know if that's just the way they do plans, but the drawing itself, I don't understand it. There's not enough information. The width of the lot is 100 feet. If you have your 15-foot or 10-foot setbacks, then you have all the buffers are going to build in, and then you have an 18-foot parking lot, parking space on each side, you cannot get 24 feet between the parking spaces. There's not enough room for that. Now, maybe that, I'm sure this gentleman's a fantastic engineer, but there's not enough information on that, except if you take the 100-foot lot length that they claim it is, and you add all these buffers and everything, and each parking space has to be 9 by 18 by code, you can't get 24 feet between them to make the two-way. That's what's required, 9 by 18 in the code. So I don't know if the drawing's in error, or if they've taken that into consideration and it's just not shown, I don't know. My question also is, how do they meet 24110 in the bylaws, performance requirements, as it relates to nuisances? No use shall be permitted which is offensive or injurious or obnoxious noise, vibration, smoke, gas, fumes, odors, etc. No permit shall be granted for any use which would prove injurious to the safety or welfare of the neighborhood into which it proposes to go, and destructive of property values because of excess nuisance qualities. And I also like to remind the board that the nursing home is right there where the parking lot's going to go back. They're with less than 75 feet from where the parking lot's going to be. That's where those people live. The only place between this parking lot, the way it's shaped, the 38-car parking lot, there's a small strip with Johnson Electric, then there's a small strip with the hotel, but then you've got the whole side of the nursing home, and that's where these people live. They're going to be putting up with the lights going on and off 24/7, the chirping of your beepers, and the fumes and everything. And God forbid that these people are either dying or they're the most vulnerable citizens we have. That's where that parking lot's going to be. So, that's all I have.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to ask questions or comment from the public? Okay. I thank you all for coming and expressing your concerns and asking your questions tonight. And let's see, we will take again next week. Okay. Thank you for coming. You can pass that down to
Make a motion to adjourn.
Excuse
We
me,
really
Madam,
need a big screen
Yeah.
to show it, because, I mean,
Madam Chair,
if he
just
would have said that.
clarification, are you requesting additional information from us by next week's hearing?
I have not requested any additional information.
Just wanted to
no.
be clear. Thank you.
Yes, I mean, if you feel in any way that you wish to respond by changing your plan based upon the, a site plan review, there's no hearing to close.
Sure.
So, yeah, no, if you wish to change your plan in any way based upon a response to any of the comments tonight, you most certainly can do so.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Madam Chairman, may I ask,
The hearing's closed.
No, you don't
you
close.
said next week you're going to meet again, is that in reference to this?
We're going to take it up next week. We can discuss this next week. It doesn't mean that we'll make a decision.
No, but open to the public again, next week.
Open to the public, but public comment, Brian, we don't do that. We've had public comment tonight. Even though, you see, it's not a hearing that you officially close. Like, I don't ring the gavel and say, that's it, it's closed. But we've taken your comments tonight.
And so next week,
Will be discussion of the board. And it may lead to a decision next week. It may not. We may continue it further.
sure, I certainly would like to listen.
Fine.
Good. And along those lines, this is not a closed hearing, so you will accept tomorrow.
I'm sorry?
This is not a closed hearing, or is it a closed hearing?
I do not officially close it. It is not a special permit. But it's closed for further public comment. We've taken all of the public comment, and now it will be the board's discussion.
But they will be submitting you some new information.
I don't think so. They wanted to know whether we wished more information, and we said no.
In the event that they should submit new information, will we be allowed to respond to the new information?
Their new information, if they submit anything, would be in response to your comments tonight, if they choose to change anything.
And so we then respond?
No.
Only special permits, the discussion.
Then gavel and say this hearing is closed, okay?
We are,
On site plan review, we just go on and
we move
make
into
our
discussion.
decisions. Yes. Okay, moving on. Cumberland Farms, Inc. is the applicant. Site plan review to construct a 3,840 square foot retail convenience store and maintain existing gasoline pumps on 1.14 acres with associated parking, drainage, and landscaping. It's Coastal Engineering. Now remember, board, again, this is a site plan review that we're doing tonight on this. Please introduce yourself.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Paul Wilson. I am a project manager for Cumberland Farms. With me tonight, I have Taria McGrail from Coastal Engineering, Colleen Medeiros, the traffic consultant from McMahon Associates, Richard Boyle, operations manager for Cumberland Farms, and I believe our attorney just walked in, Mr. Robert Mann. As you had mentioned, this is a site plan review for Cumberland Farms on 212 T-Ticket Highway. Cumberland Farms proposes the 3,840 square foot convenience store in the relative location of the existing building, but will maintain the gasoline fueling positions in the front of the property. I can turn it over to our engineer to go over the specifics of the site design. But if you have any questions at this point, for me, as a Cumberland Farms representative, I can feel free to, or be happy to answer any of those questions. But if not, I'll turn it over to Taria McGrill.
So good evening, my name is Taria McGrail. And I guess what I'll start with is I'll kind of bring you through the design, what we're showing on this plan. So as Paul mentioned, currently the site is used as a gas station, has a couple service bays and a garage, and it's also the site of a U-Haul truck rental facility. So we're proposing to continue the use as a gas station and propose a convenience store on the site. As Paul mentioned, the convenience store is going to be roughly 3,800 square feet. The existing building, which is 2,400 square feet, is going to be removed from the site and replaced with this building. As an improvement to the site, we're looking at proposing 22 customer parking spaces with an additional 2 spaces for employees. There's going to be some minor grading on the site. Most of the grading is going to be just for directing stormwater towards our proposed stormwater management system. The system to capture, treat, and manage the runoff is going to consist of 5 separate stormwater basins. We're going to use catch basins that have deep sumps to capture sediments and also capture hydrocarbons. Those basins will then send the runoff into subsurface infiltration basins where the groundwater will be recharged. In the areas that are near the fueling pumps and receiving runoff from the areas adjacent to the fueling pumps. We're proposing gate valves. The gate valves will serve to provide a way of isolating the catch basins from the recharge basins. It's a safety measure that will it will be very accessible by the store operator and allow him to shut down the system to provide safety. So currently on site, there's 2 subsurface underground fuel storage tanks. Those 2 storage tanks are going to remain, and we're proposing 1 additional tank. We're also proposing a tank that's going to serve as a remote filling spot. This will allow the trucks to pull up safely to the side and fill up the 3 tanks that are there, provide another level of safety for the operator of the truck, and also allow traffic movement throughout the site. Looking at, septic system, there's going to be the sewer coming into the area in the next couple of years. We are proposing a septic system on site that is sized based on Title V design flows to manage the wastewater from the facility until the sewer is available. We're also going to provide a sewer connection so that when the sewer is available, it's very easy for Cumberland Farms to tie in and make that connection. The system's going to consist of a grease trap, septic tank, distribution box, and soil absorption area. I guess with that,
New storage tank.
does anybody have any questions? I kind of went through the site quickly. I don't know if there's anything else I can describe in better detail.
But they had an existing one there.
Yeah, I do have one, because you had said that you're going to have several deep sumps that will take runoff, sediment, and hydrocarbons. How do you separate the hydrocarbons from the runoff? Because the hydrocarbons should not be going into the groundwater.
So I probably didn't describe that very well. It's going to be a catch basin system that is going to first capture the runoff. When it's captured in the catch basin, which is a closed structure, except for the outlet pipe, the sediments will be allowed to settle to the bottom. The hydrocarbons will float, and we're going to have a hood on the outlet pipe. So the hood will keep, the elbow on the hood is going to keep the hydrocarbons from floating on and going out. Sediments will fall to the bottom, and then Cumberland Farms will have to maintain those basins and check them periodically to remove any sediments and also the hydrocarbons.
Okay, so they're not going to be freely going into it?
No, the only thing that's going to be moving forward to the leaching basins is just going to be the runoff without the sediments that came down and without the hydrocarbons. So the hydrocarbons are trapped, the sediments trapped, the cleaner runoff moves forward to the leaching basins.
Okay, conceptually, I'm having a problem with that.
Okay.
Hydrocarbons float generally.
They
some of
do,
them-
and that's
some
why there's a
segments become
hood, there's a
dissolved.
hood, and the T sticks down.
I understand.
So the hydrocarbons are going to float to the top, but the T is going to stick down far enough into the
Down.
liquid level that the hydrocarbons can't go forward.
Okay. Does anybody else have any questions about?
That sounds like a good idea.
Yes.
I'm looking at the drawing here. The vehicle's going to be parallel to T-Ticket Highway when they fuel, or are they going to be perpendicular? I'm looking at the pumps.
They're staying the same.
Are you talking about delivery trucks? listed
No,
there?
no, the actual fueling stations for vehicles.
They will be pointed at the highway, the same as existing.
Okay, so that isn't going to change. So you're coming in and you are either going to be pointing at the building or pointing at the highway, okay. I was just a little concerned about that little island there, if they were going to be changed and running parallel.
As you know, the island doesn't exist today, and the thinking was that that was actually providing a level of safety for cars coming around the building and accidents.
Okay, I mean, it makes sense the way the vehicles will be filled. Thank you.
Paul?
Just one clarification, there's 2 existing storage tanks here now, and you're building a third one.
Correct.
But the fuel dispensers are going to remain the same, is that correct?
Correct.
Thanks.
Ralph?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions for Brian. There's 3 open items. One is setbacks, the other is non-conformities, and then the other one is coastal ponds. Could you explain those to us, Brian?
Well, the existing canopy, I think, is within 35 feet, but that's a Board of Appeals issue, just there for your application.
Stockade fence.
It's technically within our coastal pond overlay district. We're finishing up some easements with the mall for the lift stations and ejector stations to put through the board. It doesn't require any sort of enhanced natural removal of the septic systems because within hopefully 2 years, that's the plan, they'll make a connection. But it's checked off, staff has checked it off because it's technically in.
Okay.
Typically, the board doesn't require it in the little pond area, only because the sewer system.
Yeah, and the non-conformities, what is that?
I think it's a dimensional nonconformity, the canopy at the encroaches within the setback, that's something the Board of Appeals will look at as part of their special.
The only nonconformity is the existing location of the existing canopy, which is not going to change.
Right.
So while it's a nonconformity, it's legally there, permitted, and there's no change proposed to that at all.
So the zoning board of appeals would grant a waiver on that?
I don't think that the zoning board of appeals will really have any issue with that. The Board of Appeals is going to be more concerned about the new use of the site because their special permit is required whenever there is a motor vehicle use, which would include the existing gas station, and when you have another use, even if it's a allowed use, you have to go to the Board of Appeals to modify the special permit use, if you will.
For the convenience store portion?
Yes. And they'll look at all the other issues of...
Right. Okay, thank you.
Are there other comments or questions? Yes.
I think it's been answered. We're really not discussing any uses. That's for the zoning board.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep, this is site plan again. We can look
What's
at
that?
the traffic patterns, the landscaping, yes.
Yeah, that's where my question is right now, is I'm not too familiar with how the traffic pattern is set up. I mean, I noticed that there's another side now. The left side of the building is not there now where traffic goes to and fro. Is that one way? Is that both-way traffic on both sides?
Well, the way it's designed is for two-way traffic around the building. It's quite wide to do that. Presently, you know, there's still another use besides the gas station use and the fuel pump. There's also a use allowed by the Board of Appeals, which is the truck rental business that's in the rear. So that's going to be eliminated, and instead there'll be a significant area of parking available in the rear, including room for delivery trucks for the convenience store, and also the dumpsters will be back there with it being convenient to service them. But there's room to maneuver around the building. It's pretty roomy, I would think. We did submit to the staff at the request of the engineering department graphs prepared by the traffic consultant showing the movement for large trucks around the site, and it's adequate. Of course, the existing use with the largest trucks, the fuel delivery, is existing today.
Yes, Ralph.
Right. Mr. Ahmed, you know that the planning board cares a lot about safety. It looks as though there will be a marked crosswalk going from the adjacent property to the convenience store, and I would hope that there would be some kind of caution or warning given to pedestrians if they're going to use that crosswalk either on your property. Obviously, it would be on your property, but it would warn people to the effect that, and maybe a sign warning the traffic that there's a crosswalk there.
Anybody else on the board? Questions, comments? Pardon?
Madam Chairman, I do want to take an opportunity to just show the board the building that's proposed.
If you'd like to, sure.
We're pretty pleased about that. It's very much in the context of the new buildings that have been approved along Route 28 and TK in East Falmouth. We have wood siding, as you can see, dormers. So it's the same theme as the planning board has been seeing in other projects, and the design review committee has looked at this, and they've sent you a letter. I think they were pretty enthusiastic that this choice was made. Cumberland Farms has a new prototype design, which is a little bit different, and they've chosen not to use it, but rather to do this because it fits with what the town is trying to do in that stretch.
Great. Thank you. Is there anybody from the public who wishes? Yes, sir.
Can I see a site plan of, is there a site plan here on the board, you know? And I can point out something on Bob McLeod, 36 Figueredo Way. On your site plan here, they're proposing a 24-foot way, entranceway onto Figueredo Way. Figueredo Way is 12 feet wide, it says 14, but if you measure, it's 12 feet wide. Now, if you have a car coming in here, another car can't get out. If you have all this parking back here, the people are going to want to come in and start using this parking coming out. This is a dead-end street, it's a right-of-way, it's not a public road. And where are you going to go? So if a car is coming out, there's a car coming in, 9 times out of 10, we have to back out. Now, because we live there, we don't have to swing around the corner, get a stolen tire or someplace. But if you can't pass 2 cars here, one car's going to back up, you're backing out on Route 28. We'd like to see this closed off here with a fence, trees, so that you can't exit here out on Figueredo Way, because it's a real safety problem. There's also a bus stop at the end of the street here. The kids have to wait at the end of the street because next door is selling a tire, next door is a gas station. They certainly can't stand in those 2 driveways. So that's a real concern of ours, and we'd like to see it closed, fence, trees, things like that. My second question is, when the new building is being built, this appears to be a second floor on it. What is the second floor going to be used for, or what can it be used for? I have no idea. That's pretty much my concern. You have a family living here with kids. I think, you know, there should be something done with the fence back here so the lights aren't shining into their property. Just things like that. There's a lot that needs to be addressed here for the safety of the neighborhood, per se. Thank you.
Lights are not supposed to go onto other property. They have downlights that are supposed to be there. That's part of the bylaw. Do you want to address that drive, or, okay?
I can do so, yes. Thank you, Madam Chair. Paul Wilson again from Cumberland Farms. The access onto the right-of-way there was actually done, it was my idea, because the first time that I drove to the site, I accidentally went down Figueredo Way and was not able to enter the property, and did have to do a maneuver similar to what the gentleman was speaking about. So it was more of a relief valve to prohibit people from having to pull around and turn around in people's driveways. But with that said, we would be happy to eliminate that curb cut if it so pleases the board. With regard to the second floor, it is not a second floor. It is actually just those dormers are aesthetics. They're not there for anything more than just curb appeal.
Could you address the screening in the back? I see it on the landscape plan, but you might want to describe
certainly.
it.
That was the other question. So, consistent.
Yeah, you can use it. Yeah, you should use that.
So consistent with the town bylaw, we were required to have certain amount of trees along anything abutting a residential property, which you can see here. We have a very thick, dense planting schedule around here, as well as the neighbors, and taking into consideration that the neighbor does have an existing fence on their property, we didn't see the need to double stack fences along that property line. But to further touch on the lighting, you're correct. We are not allowed to have any light cross over the property line, and we did submit our lighting plan, which shows that our lighting will not encroach into any of Butter's properties.
And could I ask another?
Yes.
And also, could you tell me how that's done where the dumpster pickup is?
The dumpster
Is there
pickup?
screening for that as well?
There is a fence around that, stockade fence, or it depends on the taste of the boards. Some like a more opaque fence, or like a vinyl or white fence, or a stockade fence, either.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
May I ask him a question?
Yes.
I would like to ask about the screening. How high is that? Because my concern is, I understand the lights from the property, but now we have headlights of vehicles parking. And I know there's a fence, but how high is your screening to block that out?
Forgive me, I have to look at the chart. I can't remember these things off the top of my head. Tara, do you happen to know this off the top of your head by any chance? Or? No, okay. Let's see. Yeah, NSW.
Big trees. Say 8 inches. That's the number 8.
I'd have to consult with the landscaper and come back, right?
I might have to consult with the landscaper. I'm not a landscape architect. I do apologize for that. But I do know that they are meant to be screening trees. They're junipers, so they're very dense. They're year-round green.
You said that there was already a fence there, and you didn't see a need to double stack. Would you consider putting a fence so that there's a fence and your shrubbery for protection?
We could absolutely do that. We don't like to typically do that sometimes, because then you create a dead zone where activity can happen.
Yeah.
But it would be, we would absolutely entertain an additional fence.
I'm just curious
if the board
as
so
to
chooses.
the condition of the existing fence, that's all.
I believe it was recently installed. This is just from my own recollection, or looking at the site. It looked in pretty good condition.
Thank you.
Well,
Yes, sir.
Hi, I'm Lee Ennis, number 20 Figueroa Way, and in concerns of the entrance off of Figueroa Way, very tight quarters. He had my question, he probably said he may eliminate that, which would be great. But I took a few pictures to see the area that these trucks and cars would be coming into, if you're interested in taking a look at them.
Sure. So what you brought
You
up.
want these back?
Yeah, I didn't make copies of such a cover. That's the entrance right by the fence is, the entrance by 28, trying to get in there, and it's just impossible. 2 vehicles per half. The mailman has to pull over into Jamie's yard, so that the mail truck moves it through. It's totally impossible.
And it's how wide?
12 feet.
12 feet.
Yeah, we measured.
It's impossible.
Exactly, you see the car, my truck is there, and the car's trying to get by my truck.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm over as far as I can go. And beyond that, before we get away from Pizzoco's land, there's a huge hedge which belongs to Sullivan Tire, so we can't cut that in.
Yeah.
So closing that would satisfy you then?
Closing the gate would make us happy.
Okay.
That, and we're concerned about the hours of operation. What are they going to be?
Different board.
Different board.
Yep, we don't do that under site plan review.
Okay.
But it seems like they are wanting to please the neighborhood, so.
Well, that'd be great.
You could
Actually,
certainly
we were
talk
promised
with
a
them.
fence a year ago, we never got it from
Yeah.
Pizzoco, so.
Yeah.
This is a whole new program.
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah.
appreciate you just considering that road.
Okay. That sounds like a good thing. Is there any other further comment from the public? Okay. Well, then we will take this up again next week.
See you all next week.
Thank you very much for coming.
Here he comes back, closing this. We'll pull this plan away, see what's underneath.
Nothing. Oh, my God.
Shut it down.
It's still coming.
Put these together.
That was a lot easier.
Yeah, no drive-through.
Brian, do we have any correspondence? Okay. So that was the next thing on our agenda, we don't have any. And the next meeting is next week.
Next week, with a lot on it.
I move to adjourn?
Second.
You moved and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
But